Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, welcome. We have a few new folks here, so just a little background. We've been going through a text called Meditations on the Stages on the Path to Enlightenment. And so it's taking these meditation practices that one would do to familiarize themselves with the aspects of the nature of our lives and struggles that happen and how to engage with the teachings of the Buddha in a way that's hopefully practical and meaningful to you. And all the way from the very beginnings, foundational teachings, up to we're currently entering what would be a Bodhisattva path. And the way that I teach is I try to bring the Buddhist teachings in a universal way. So if someone's not a Buddhist, you can find what's being taught in a way that hopefully can help you with your life in ways that are meaningful. So people often come to teachings to just be able to engage in their life in a more fulfilling way, reduce suffering, have some skills. Some people will engage with the path of exploring, being curious. Some people find themselves in a Buddhist path that makes sense to them, that works for them. And within Buddhist lineages, there's Theravadan Buddhism, which is a foundational path to be free. There's then what we call Bodhisattva or Mahayana paths that are paths that the Buddha taught as well that seek to have everyone be free. And within that, they have the Zen tradition and the Tibetan traditions. And so I'm of a Tibetan tradition, and I think it's important to just bring these teachings in ways that are just practical. And we always tell people to investigate, find what works for them. Don't take anything just because it's written down somewhere. You have to investigate, find things that are meaningful, see if that makes sense, and then try it out. So welcome. So we're just concluding what's called the initial scope of teachings, which is foundational ethics, concentration, wisdom, the foundation of all spiritual growth being virtuous activities, wholesome activities, good ethics, and doing things you feel good about, and seem to be universally true and helpful. Concentration, being able to be present, know why we're doing what we're doing. And now we're entering into the next scope of teachings, which is that of a bodhisattva. So we'll pop up the text here. So normally read a little bit, talk about it. It's a dialogue, so don't wait till I'm all done. You can say, hey, about this. People online usually feel very free to do that. Okay. So meditations of the advanced level, cultivating bodhicitta, a great compassion. Independence on these practices of the initial and intermediate levels, I am able to attain only self-liberation, as there is not one sentient being in all the 6 realms who has not been my mother or father. I will turn away from this lower happiness and generate the wish to fulfill their ultimate purposes. By contemplating the path of equalizing and exchanging self for others, I will generate the precious bodhicitta and engage in the bodhisattva's actions, the 6 perfections. Please bless me with the potential to train in this way. A glance meditation on the all-important points of Lamrim from Vajradhara, the Losang Jimpa. So it starts with a quote, then we unpack. Introduction to Bodhicitta and its benefits. With the advanced level or the great scope, we reach the heart of the Lamrim, cultivating Bodhicitta, the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, and practicing the 6 perfections, which are the main causes for attaining enlightenment. A person who has worked on cultivating bodhicitta over a long period of time and has reached the point where it arises effortlessly and spontaneously is a bodhisattva. Everyone can develop bodhicitta and become a bodhisattva. The advanced level meditations show us how to do that. So again, this is built upon, this having noticed in our own lives causes of suffering and struggles. And we may have noticed that our friends and neighbors kind of have struggles and sufferings. And we kind of notice, well, there's some common causes going on here. And the the ultimate actual cause of it all is a sense of seeing ourselves as independent. And that's not how we are. You don't even need to be a Buddhist to figure that out. And it's just not how we feel pretty independent. I feel like I'm over here, you're over there. And, this is my phone, not your phone. It feels pretty independent. Except for when we start to explore a little bit and recognize that there's, try to find something independent about you. Not going to find it. I mean, your body, you didn't create that, right? Parents, grandparents, their parents, things, the body wasn't yours. It's dependent upon cause and condition. It's growing. It's changing moment to moment. There's food, there's air, there's oxygen, there's other people. There's the words that we get to read. Who taught those to us? How did we learn to read? Who created language? It was paper, the trees. You start thinking that even thoughts that come in my mind, well, they were dependent upon anything I've learned or experienced or come from. And you start to understand that it's pretty hard to find anything independent that is John here, that is not dependent upon, interdependent with. But that's generally not how we operate, is it? I kind of see it as, my stuff, me, my thoughts, my creations. Can I create anything without anything that has created me or my ideas or opportunities? We live independent upon each other. It's an independent world we live in, and there weren't bees pollinating, the whole thing would fall apart, right? But easy to forget all of that, easy to forget all that, easy to forget that we're sitting in a building built by other people we've never even met, and materials that came from places we've never seen. Walk on roads built by people we've never met. Not everything we have in our lives is because of others. Literally all these beings that have been giving life to us. And in the quote, it says, all living beings having been our mothers. Well, they give life to us. But often we just kind of see them as a jerk in my way sometimes. Maybe irresponsible and not very helpful. And so it's just radically recognizing, wow, what if I didn't see myself as so independent? How is this suffering arising from what I like and what I don't like and what I think things should be like and how things shouldn't be and how others should be? And, you can sort of see all the stress, worry, fear, and struggle that comes up out of that sense of me and mine. And so As we explore this, we start to recognize there's a lot of unnecessary suffering from that sense of self. In a way, we do not exist. Doesn't mean we don't exist. It just means we exist a little differently than we see ourselves. So that being the core, then we kind of notice that, yeah, I get stuck in that misunderstanding, and so do others. And then people get jealous, and people get angry, and people get resentful. And I often go back to a teacher, Khandro Rinpoche, who basically said our whole real problem is we just don't know how to love each other. If we knew how to do that, we wouldn't need all this stuff. And because we don't know how to love each other, then we need like some skills. You probably shouldn't treat people like that. So you learn the skill, and then we still have complications. So we need this other one. We still don't know how to do that. And then pretty soon you got all these teachings that show us how to remove the obstacles that prevent us from learning how to love each other. And it gets very there's a lot of lessons because it's so sneaky. And so bodhicitta is this recognition of our shared struggle and a desire to remove that suffering from ourselves and others. And with that type of motivation, there's an incredible energy that takes place. You just don't get tired. Bodhicitta is this real energetic force that I draw upon. It's it's that whole thing of a mother, in the middle of the night, hasn't slept in days, taking care of their child. You're just there. Of course, you're there. I saw a guy. I don't know if you ever saw this video, but a guy in Florida, his little dog got snapped up by a little baby alligator. You saw that, right? He went out and wrestled that little alligator and got his little dog out, saved him. It's that kind of thing, and there's in Aspen, right? We had the mom who got the baby out of the mountain lion, a younger mountain lion. Yeah, go out there and I'm getting my kid, like that kind of thing, um, we're showing up for this, and so there's these practices that really can cultivate that degree of inner strength, of resilience, motivation, bodhicitta. And it's really dedicated to eliminating suffering, self and others. So, and it popped in it, there's 6 perfections. So the path of a bodhisattva: generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. Like these are the 6 attitudes, states of minds, activities that can be perfected to that path. Just as the upper levels of a house will be solid and stable only if the lower levels are built well. For our practice of bodhicitta and the 6 perfections to be strong and stable, we must train well in the meditations of the initial and medium levels. In the initial level meditations, we realized that our current situation is precarious. Our life will end at some point, but we do not know when. Death is certain, time of death uncertain. So one of the beginning level meditations is just simply that. We take it for granted. We put so much off till tomorrow. Yeah, I'll get my stuff together tomorrow. Do those retreats then, or I'll learn how to resolve those issues tomorrow. And we forget that we might not be here tomorrow. So each day, like one of the foundational practices is to recognize when we wake up that this day is only coming once. This is it. Won't come again. We may or may not have another one. How do you want to live today? How do you want to live today? What is it you want to cultivate? What's meaningful? Today is actually my mom's birthday. She passed away some time ago, 2005. And my oldest brother, I had a phone call with my oldest brother today. My mom had 9 kids. You got time for stories? Yeah. 9 kids. Mom raised 9 kids by herself. And amazing. Worked, hard, took a bus to downtown LA, went to school at night. My older brothers, I'm 8 out of 9, we were poor and got caught up in, violence and heroin addiction. And my house has actually been shot into drive-bys when I was middle school, so that kind of environment. And my mom took us to church every Sunday, man. My mom never gave up. And, actually all 5 of us males found recovery. And, I've got 41 years now, and my brothers found their recovery. My mom passed. We were able to be around her, we spent 24-hour cycles with her in the hospital. She was not going to make it. We got to let her know that it's okay to go, Mom. We're okay. All your boys are okay. She lived in her 80s, because moms worry about their kids, but we're okay. We're all good. And I'm sharing this because my oldest brother has been sort of, it doesn't get, the family hasn't been united in ways, and he's doesn't get to interact with the rest of my family much. There's feelings that have been taking place over many years, and anyway, I got to call him today, and talk to my big brother, on my mom's birthday. And, it's just a healing thing. And I think, he's 70, he's going on 76. I'm 63. How many times is that going to happen again? That's what I'm getting to. Is that a lot of times we let relationships fade, and we don't call the people we care about. We don't heal the relationships that are meaningful in our lives, and we wait, and then they're not there anymore. So each day to recognize death is certain, time of death uncertain. How do you want to live today? How do you want to live today? What is it that's meaningful? What's really important? And you can already see how that's going to reduce a lot of suffering if I recognize that if this is my last day, or if I think of it might be your last day, how am I going to interact with you? How am I going to interact? We all have a terminal illness. It's called life. The real cause of our death is our birth. They don't put that on the death certificate, but technically. And wow. What's the things that we get caught up in about if we just remembered that? So that's where we build this house, this foundation. That we reflect upon this, and we reflect about the opportunities that we have in this life. And then, what happens to us after death depends on how we lived our life, the kind of karma we create. If we are not careful to refrain from non-virtuous karma, we could find ourselves being reborn in an unfortunate situation where we encounter unbearable sufferings and lack the necessary conditions to continue following a spiritual path. To avoid such a predicament, we rely on the Buddha and his teachings to understand the difference between non-virtuous and virtuous karma, so we can refrain from the former and create the latter, and thus take rebirth in a favorable situation. And so that presupposes that you might have a thought that you live beyond this life, And so from Buddhist teachings, they'd say that what happens is as our body dies, our consciousness just continues. It just starts seeing itself differently, right? Without a body now. And so you've seen probably or read about, those little death experiences people have. They're kind of floating and, these start seeing themselves in different ways without a body. And at some point, based on karma and the habits and the conditioning, they'll start seeing themselves taking birth in new form, just being different and then having a body. And it's kind of like when you dream, right? You're in those dreams and you wake up, you're in this other thing. But that it's not like a soul goes anywhere. It's just a continual consciousness that's living moment to moment based on its habits, its conditioning, its ripening. And so from a Buddhist perspective, then the kind of habits and attitudes and things that we've cultivated will show up in that next life. So it can be, this ongoing struggle, or it can be creating conditions for more freedom. And then if you don't quite know about a rebirth or are absolutely opposed to the idea of rebirth, it's the same thing, which means at the time of death, what's going to matter? It's how you lived your life, right? Do you want to die without regret? So that if it's the end, it's the end, but you felt like you lived it well, right? What's it like to die without regret? So virtuous, wholesome activities that we feel good about, what's meaningful. Well, at the time of death, then we can die some peace, some ease. We lived well. If there's a next life, well, then there's a trajectory of this ripening karma.
So have a rebirth in our life, spiritual rebirth.
Well, technically, we're born moment to moment.
Who we were
to
become more.
Yeah, and
in this life.
Online, were you able to hear any of that? Okay. The question was kind of like, can we have sort of a rebirth in this life? I don't need to lean into that. I normally hand the mic out, so I need to remember that. A shedding, meaning letting go of who we were and becoming more. And we would say we're actually always doing that. We're just not knowing it. So you're not who you were yesterday. You're not who you were 10 years ago, right? We're always in a state of becoming. We're always in a state of becoming. And from a Buddhist perspective, your ultimate nature is Buddha nature. It's not this stuff, right? So you're shedding, right? You're letting go of grasping onto an identity that is not who you are, right? And so that can be a continuous daily practice that we can more consciously let go and not identify with, right? Aspects of ourselves that have limited us. And we can be doing that all the time now. So we're always in a state of becoming. But what we water grows. And so our habits and tendencies get very strong. So sometimes very hard to let go of because those habits and the conditioning are so strong. But we can just start letting them go piece by piece. And these meditations that were done prior to this section are about kind of attacking those ideas about ourselves.
It's more relative for me.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine life after death. I guess the whole energy of it, but it's hard for me to relate or attach to that.
Mm-hmm.
But if I relate it to the here and now, it makes it more tangible or easy to work the habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stick with that. Online, just mentioning that it can be easier to relate to that transformation here and now than the idea of something beyond, right? Yeah. And we always say, be where you are. And don't adopt beliefs without investigation. Investigate. See where you're at. But we are always in a state of becoming. We're technically always in that state. And so this development is happening now, and we can do it more and more. Right here, right now. Yeah, I'm far from the knucklehead I used to be. I'm a totally different knucklehead. Yeah. So, okay, online hasn't popped in yet, so I'm going to continue. Yeah, so virtuous and non-virtuous karma, and the idea then is, and we just covered this last week, is really knowing what are the attitudes and activities of body, speech, and mind that really support well-being, freedom, really the source of a genuine happiness. And so certain activities, we had that top 10 list we covered last week, so I'm not going to do the whole thing, but non-harming versus harming, keeping it very simple. Am I engaged in activities that are helpful or harmful, that bring healing versus pain? And just being aware that it's our motivation that's going to be the biggest impact to the activity. Do I wish ill upon others, or do I wish others to be well? Can my interaction with you be one that's dedicated to a healthy interaction instead of a hateful or hurtful one? And can I even present boundaries and structure to hold someone accountable, not thinking they're a terrible person? Their behaviors are terrible. And we need to address those. That's loving kindness, right? I know you didn't mean to hurt me or harm me in that way, in that sense, but it did happen. And there's an accountability piece. And for us to be healthy, right now, maybe I don't need you in my life in this way. Not because you're a bad person, it's just not healthy right now, right? So even learning how to hold these interactions with each other in ways that are healthy and meaningful, with a desire for just the best interaction we can have in a healthy way. So understanding then a very basic principle is you're going to feel better about yourself when you do things you feel good about. And you're not going to feel so good about yourself when we act in ways you don't feel good about. So virtue and non-virtue, there's nobody judging it. It's just the nature of how we either give rise to a sense of connection, value, and well-being, or, anger, resentment, jealousy, a sense of self-centeredness versus selflessness. Self-centeredness instead of self-worth. Self-worth is meaningful. Self-centeredness in this self-grasping way is very harmful. Self-worth, understanding our connection with each other in life. We have value, so do others. And just because some others are more afflicted than I am, doesn't mean I'm any better. It means I'm a little more fortunate right now. That's all. A little more fortunate. Some people have helped me learn how to live a little better, and others haven't had that yet. So that understanding with each other. All right. The intermediate level meditations pick up from there. So we've kind of built this foundation on these ethics and this understanding, causes suffering, the incredible opportunity we have in just one day. And if we live these days well, no matter what happens at the end of our lives, we can die without regret in a way that's meaningful and productive. The intermediate level meditations pick up from there, revealing that there are problems even in fortunate states of rebirth, as long as we remain in samsara. That's a limited conditioned existence. We are never completely free of suffering and its causes. Clearly recognizing this, we develop renunciation, the determination to free ourselves from samsara, and the wish to attain nirvana, freedom, awakening. Renunciation can also be called self-compassion. Compassion is the wish for sentient beings, in this case ourselves, to be free of suffering and its causes. If we really care about ourselves, it's not enough to merely wish that we avoid problems like sickness or depression in this life. Ideally, we take a wider perspective and wish ourselves to be free of problems in all future lives as well. That is renunciation. So I want to reframe that a bit. So what are we renouncing? How about delusional thinking? So if we can really identify how much of our mental and emotional suffering is in our mind and not in the event. Yeah. How much of our suffering is we think things shouldn't be the way they are. Yeah, you just kind of think about that one. That's an interesting thing. That should not have happened. Does that sentence even make sense? That should not have happened. That would imply there's no cause for it to happen, right? There weren't causes. But there were causes and it did happen. I don't like that that happened. That's an appropriate statement. I'd like to create conditions where that doesn't happen again. That's appropriate. But thinking others should be different than they are and the world should be different than it is, and it shouldn't be like this, doesn't quite hold up to investigation. So we have a big cause of suffering simply from thinking things should be different than they are, instead of just simply recognizing, I would like things to be better than they are. Simple shift to reality. Often they'll bring to mind a very simple way of recognizing how much suffering we bring upon ourselves is in this very moment. Could you be okay? In this moment, you all right? You might be a little uncomfortable in your position. Might be in a nice home, might be a little chilly, maybe turn up the heat, I don't know. It's a little cold in this building earlier. I was a little surprised. But pretty much in this environment right here, right now, it's going to be very hard to find a real problem in the moment you're living in. But generally, you'll find that if I'm angry, frustrated, resentful, or whatever, fearful, anxious, it has to do with something I'm thinking about, not what's happening, and how I'm projecting onto those events, and how much I think they'll either cause me suffering or joy. And that's all relational from my mind. I get to fill in that, attached to it, and now I'm stressed. And then someone might give me some news in a minute, and then I'm not so stressed because I just got good news. That's not a problem. But this would have been a problem, but then this isn't. And all day long, our mind's jumping around to all these perceived potential issues, problems, worries, fears, fundamentally coming from a sense of insecurity, right? I'm insecure that this may not work out, or I might lose that, or this may happen. And I'm insecure I'm not capable in some ways of doing this or doing that, or someone may or may not like me. And we just start to recognize how much of our mental emotional suffering has very little to do with the events, but how I'm relating to them. I mean, if somebody's hitting you in the baseball bat, that's going to hurt. You can think all the happy thoughts you want. But that's probably not happening in this moment. So there is those real pain things. But just looking at the mental and emotional suffering, we're going to discover it has so much more to do with how we relate to the events in our lives than the events themselves. I mean, just go to the airport and watch. Missing my flight. My flight's delayed. He had to be on the tarmac. Oh my, I just flew home yesterday. So, there's so much suffering at airports. And, I just try to wish people well, but yeah, just all the things, because we can get so. Anybody here ever missed a flight or had one delayed or anything? You okay? Are you okay? You lived. You made it. All right. You guys online? It's all right. We did it. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing when you're in the moment how desperate it is. Yeah. Sam readjusted a flight, right? Yeah. Switch. Yeah. Sometimes you actually have to stay in a hotel. That's terrible. Spend a night in a hotel. God, I don't know how people do that. It's so inconvenient, though. Yeah. It's amazing. I was Telluride. Some of you may know Telluride. Yeah. Beautiful place. You haven't been to Telluride. There's this big, long valley. It goes to a box canyon. Beautiful drive. Big, and it's pristine, sort of a nature environment from the village of Telluride, down the valley. There's no building there. There's a lot of times elk. It's quite beautiful. And I was staying at a place down valley a little bit. And, this person was coming to see me and, had an appointment with me. And so I think speed limit's 35, but people drive 40 really. It's kind of like Catherine Shore Road, right? It's 35, but mostly 42-ish, And anyway, so she's driving down and to see me, and the person in front of him is going like 30. We want to talk about suffering. I mean, it was brutal. It's just brutal. And she's like, really struggling. She's, any locals know better than this. And, but there are, probably some tourists, they're just looking around, enjoying the beauty, very insensitive. And, and then she noticed about halfway through there that she's in a hurry to get through one of the most beautiful environments she gets to live in. And she took a few breaths and, just drove the rest of the valley, right? But this is what our mind does, right? We don't see the wonder that's right in front of us in the moments that we live in. We don't see our resiliency. We don't see that we've lived through every single challenge that's ever come our way that has provided us with more resources and ability and capacity to be with others. We don't recognize all that in the moment of somebody telling you that your flight's going to be a half hour late and you might miss your next one. It's going to be a rush. And you'll get to complain to someone on a phone for about 20 minutes about that. This one lady, she's on my flight, front row, said, you guys should know this. Southwest Airlines, they're just mean people. Don't ever fly them. Okay. Public service announcement. And she was telling the United people, I picked you guys, I fly Southwest. They're so mean. This flight's taken me an extra couple hours, but I'm flying United because flight attendant on a Southwest flight, guess she had her foot kind of in the aisle or something. And that flight attendant told her, move your foot. I mean, she didn't say it nice. She didn't say, could you please move? She said, in a mean way, move your foot. Yeah, I'm never flying then again. Like literally, like this is a true story. I just heard yesterday. And So, but our mind, like that's all of Southwest Airlines. It's not maybe a flight attendant in a hurry who wasn't mindful or maybe having a difficult day ask you to move your foot in a mean way, right? But all of Southwest Airlines is terrible. And she's spending an extra 2.5 hours flying on United, and she could have been there on Southwest 2.5 hours earlier. But you're worth it. The mind is a tricky place. Mind's a very tricky place. And at the same time, the United flight attendants felt pretty nice. It was a compliment. It's a tricky business, this mind. So if we can start to really have a foundation about how in our own minds we're creating suffering, and that the real cause isn't the event is a condition in how I relate to that event, which has a lot to do with me, is creating the mass amount of mental and emotional suffering. Then I can actually start working on the causes of suffering in my life and not try to change all of you. You're not very cooperative. I've discovered that. But when I start understanding this subjective experience and how I'm exaggerating, identifying with, projecting my desires about how the world and others should be, I can more realistically adapt to how they are and then bring maybe some attitudes, thoughts, and skillfulness to interactions with you and the events of our lives. And we can suffer much less just in that. So the preparatory practices around samsara, we think of these, it's essentially a domain that's controlled by karma, basically. I think that's a good way of putting it. So karma is sort of the habits and conditions and tendencies that we have and interacts in this world that we live in and experience. And so we may notice that a good example of sort of the afflictions and karma and the limitations that we all have is any time that you've made a New Year's resolution, you may have found that you didn't succeed, right? I'm going to be like this. And your mind and body says, no, we're not. That's ridiculous. Yeah, we're going to go eat that dessert you already said you weren't going to do. And you may notice, yeah, I'm going to, like we read all these books, we get all this stuff, I've got all this knowledge, and I'm going to still be a jerk to my partner tomorrow. And you're just like, really? That still happened. So that's the limitation. When we think about samsara, think about being unable to really bring the virtue to mind that you'd like, to be the person you'd like. You may notice that it just doesn't happen like that, right? This idea of free will lasts for about, I don't know, could be 20 minutes or 30. I mean, you might even get a half a day going, right? And then, we fall into habits and patterns and conditions, right? And we don't, even if we, what's the, I always get interested around, all you have to think happy thoughts, be happy, and but the world's difficult, right? The world's full of struggles. Thinking happy thoughts does not make the world a happy place. Think realistic thoughts, and we might have the skills to at least work with what is difficult in a way that builds resilience and well-being. But we may all notice that if we want to be a good partner, a good brother, a good sister, a good friend, that even in those relationships, we wound up being short-tempered, not mindful, maybe even some people actually argue. I don't know if you've noticed. And with our partners, like, why would you do that? We're sharing a life together, a shared joy of things, and you're arguing. For the record, and those of you who've been keeping score, who know me for a little bit, today I put the bowl in the dishwasher the way Laura does. It didn't hurt. She noticed it. It was a moment. It made kind of sense, sort of. And I just put it in that way. Wow. We can change. And, but it's these things that we'll notice with our partners, our friends, just little things sometimes, right? We always had the toilet paper dilemma up and over, down, and we don't have time for that discussion. But we sit here and we think about how we, when you've been anxious, when you've been angry, when you've been frustrated, how much of that actually has to do with the event or the person, and investigate and see how much it has to do with the mind I'm bringing to it. So those are all this building block. You're starting to realize that the vast amount of mental, emotional suffering and struggle has a lot to do with my mind and attitudes, not the event itself. And that's just straight up Western psychology too. You don't need to be a Buddhist to figure that out. That's I call it cognitive behavioral therapy. Thinking errors, right? And globalizing and catastrophizing and, just all those things. And so just baseline, how about self-care? That I would want to be free of that conditioning, samsara. I want to be free of it. I want to be liberated from grasping on to people, places, and things in ways they don't exist, and myself in a way I do not exist. And all the mental, emotional struggle that comes along with that. And so those initial foundational practices are start to notice that. And what if I shifted how I attended to an event? I may notice I have a very different experience. No, just a bit. It may be because, someone talked about my foot on an airline, or maybe we go to a restaurant and, the server was not in a good mood that day, or I wasn't. Doesn't mean the restaurant's bad. Right? Somebody might like that restaurant. And just to notice how we can experience a whole world through our own lens and not really understand, it's really a subjective experience. And as I shift, different things shift. And what other people say actually makes sense to them. No, it makes absolutely none to me. Yeah. But based on how they're raised, their experiences, their condition, their things totally make sense. I just got to listen to someone tell me about an alternate universe I do not exist in. But that's how he thinks the world is. That's interesting. And it does for him. And mine does for me, right? We all of you are having a different experience in this moment. You're all seeing a different John. But we forget that. We just think things are like that and so-and-so's like that. And then we get caught up and get a lot of labels that get in the way of a new moment with people and beings and this journey that we're on together. So we can be free of that misunderstanding. And so that's the practice that they're describing of renunciation. What we're renouncing is the delusional thinking that traps us in samsara, the delusional activities that go along with that. You're not renouncing a good meal. Okay. People think of renunciation, they think of that aesthetic lifestyle. But it's actually renouncing the delusional grasping of self and others in ways they don't exist. And learning how you do. Learning how, and that's freedom. So freedom from samsara is just wisdom. Stop identifying me and mine with that which is not me and mine. That shedding that was just being talked about. Stop identifying with, I am not my anxiety. I am experiencing anxiety. And it arises from time to time. And then sometimes I'm not anxious. And then sometimes I'm polite, and sometimes I'm not polite. But I'm not inconsiderate, and I'm not polite. I'm a human being that is hopefully more polite than I'm inconsiderate. And that these are mental and emotional states that come and go, but they're not who we are. But the habituated patterns of them, they'll get triggered and show up a lot more. That's the karma, right? The imprints and the kleshas that will get triggered based on the conditions. But if I work on the inner qualities, those conditions will not trigger those mental and emotional afflictive states. So that's how it works. So Buddhism's an inside job. It's an insider working with our misperceptions and our afflictive states and essentially removing them, and everything else changes. My experience of everything changes. You may notice at the airport, you might see a bunch of nice people trying to get where they need to be, including that person at the airport who won't let you on the plane because you're too late. It's not their fault. It's their job. I was once in a group that almost wanted to run over a person, wasn't letting them off what's that walk with the skygate thing? What do you call that? The skyway. From the plane to there's a security alert. The whole thing shut down, and we're like just on the other side of the door, and this attendant said, there could be someone with a gun. It was a whole thing, right? Not gonna let you out. But, like after like 5 minutes of them waiting, people were ready to overthrow this poor woman at the door. I was like, wow. This lady's just trying to keep you safe, I think. Anyway, we negotiated, stopped the rebellion. One guy snuck out though. That's what he just went for it. Just screw it. I'm walking through the door. Wow. So, but to him it was very important, right? Whatever it is. We get caught up in how we think things should be. So if we build this foundation of starting to be more thoughtful about the type of person we're becoming, avoiding the types of habits and activities that keep us imprisoned and creating suffering, cultivating the qualities, that was the increasing the latter, avoiding the former. We're going to start to notice how we relate to others in the world and our experiences in a healthier, more meaningful way, being more connected and understanding this connection. It's very palpable, when you walk into a room with a smile versus a frown, or a tension or a tightness versus some joy. And there's this wondrous thing that we have called today. It comes only once. What am I cultivating? This is the last time we talk. I hope it's a meaningful time. And let me see if we can finish this little paragraph here. I'm gonna put on my spectacles. Look all smart. Well, maybe if I didn't make the face, it worked. By the way, I do amuse myself a lot. Renunciation sees that samsaric existence involves one painful situation after another, and that we deserve better. We have the right to be free of suffering and to experience the lasting peace and happiness of nirvana. Such understanding motivates us to start practicing the methods to become free. The 3 higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, that's the Noble Eightfold Path. That's the path of no more suffering. A person who has followed this path and attained nirvana, the cessation of all delusions such that they will never arise again, is known as an arhat, right? They've attained freedom, liberation, nirvana, or a foe destroyer, one who has destroyed the foe of delusions. This is an excellent achievement, but is not the fulfillment of our highest potential. Wait, there's more. Remember those commercials? Only $19.99, but there's more. You purchase now, you'll get this other additional device. Yeah, I miss those TV commercials. So, it's not our highest potential. There are still subtle obscurations in the mind prevent us from being fully enlightened, like a Buddha's mind, and one's ability to help others is limited. Therefore, some practitioners aspire to attain perfect, complete enlightenment, the state of a Buddha reached, because only then will they have the fully developed ability to help all other sentient beings become free of samsara. Nevertheless, even those who wish to become a Buddha must familiarize themselves with the intermediate level meditations in order to clearly recognize the faults of samsara and generate the wish to free all sentient beings who are trapped in it. And so just, let me see where that'll take us. Yeah, all right, that's a good place. So just on a technical note in the Buddhist framework is you can achieve nirvana. You can be free of suffering, and that's an arhat. You're free. You're not going to be caught. You're free of all that karmic stuff, all the delusion. You're free. You're good. But you're not. What's quiet would be a fully enlightened Buddha. So there's those who are liberated, and then like enlightened, full Buddhists, and there's these slight, very subtle obscurations that are still there. And the way they phrase it, it's kind of like sort of the smell maybe of garlic when the garlic's already gone, but the smell's in the room. It's like that subtle, right? The obscurations are gone, but there's like a fragrance left. This very subtle, thin veil. And so Arhats, Theravadan path, everyone is kind of focused on liberation themselves, attaining nirvana, Arhats. Bodhisattvas, are going on this full Buddhahood path to remove even those subtle obscurations. And so both paths are fine, but, that would be the distinction. And so the next meditations are going to be moving towards that path of a bodhisattva with the motivation that not only do I want to be free, I want all you to be free. I don't want anyone to suffer. And it's that heartfelt motivation and energy and force that can accelerate the elimination of these delusions and afflictions. It's just energy in a really meaningful way, which will recognize the ultimate state. But you're also going to find that if you just want to be a better human being, wants to have a good life, believe it or not, generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom will help you do that. And if you recognize that everyone that you come in contact with is also contributing to the quality of your life, guess what? We're all going to be a little better off. So it's nice to meet the Dharma at whatever level you're engaged with it without having to take on a higher ideal. Instead, just be where we're at with it and utilize it, keeping a door open. One of the, I think, interesting things that happens is people might be very inspired to be a bodhisattva and have a bodhisattva path, be like the Dalai Lama, and I want to free all sentient beings from suffering. And, and that's my aspiration, that's my motivation, but it's really in direct conflict with how I'm treating my neighbor. Okay. I want everybody to be free of suffering, except those people over there, real jerks, and I can't get along with them, but I'm willing to dedicate my whole life to benefit of all beings, except so-and-so is really, man, can you believe they say, and you're sitting there going, it's discordant, right? I'm still working on trying to be a better neighbor. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to free all sentient beings, but maybe I should start with my neighbor, and just It doesn't mean we don't really let go if we don't aspire to something like that, but meeting ourselves where we're at with the heart that we can cultivate, that can achieve that, right? But it starts with where we're at, not trying to be where we're not. And so in a bodhisattva motivation is seeing the suffering of self, seeing the suffering of others, recognizing we have this capacity to reduce suffering. So compassion is dedicated to reducing suffering and engaging in these more productive ways of living. So the more that we can do that with self and others, then we build a momentum. And there may be, this compassion just ripens when we start to see the value in others and how they contribute to your life. And the meditations previously that we've already covered, you start to see how everyone is giving you an opportunity to be a better human being, let alone someone who's liberated, right? Even the people we don't like. Matter of fact, they challenge you to develop yourself even more. So that's the framework. And I think picking up next week, we'll move into these bodhisattva type activities and practices and reflections. So anybody else have any thoughts or questions? This is not much of a dialogue. Thank you so much for offering your input. Yeah, that was my one dialogue. So helpful. Everybody else online, you good? All right. All right, let's go ahead. Those who'd care to, we dedicate the merit of our time together, all this time and energy of contemplation of working to be better human beings, to be helpful to others, and a lot of things we could have done on a Wednesday night. Could have been doing pickleball. Right? They got lights. But we have taken the time to work on ourselves, to cultivate our hearts and our minds, to reflect upon the meaning of life, our value of ourselves and others, and engage in teachings that have been transmitted through time, an unbroken lineage, and available to us here. So let's dedicate any and all merit, wisdom that has been arisen here for ourselves and others. Dedicate merit from today and from our previous adventures in life, and it may find its way into the world to benefit others, to relieve them of suffering. And may the merit and wisdom be dedicated for our own continued spiritual growth, that we may ultimately recognize our own Buddha nature, be of greatest benefit to all. And with that context, those who'd care to can join in a formal meditation. I mean, dedication, not meditation, dedication. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om